I know, it's that time of the year again, and I know a lot of you are currently trying to put your LLM applications together for next year. So if you're thinking of starting school next year, this is probably the time. You have this window of September till December, and even some schools maybe January, February, March, and down the line. But you're currently trying to put your applications together, and I've gotten a ton of questions from a lot of you, right? Either as a YouTube comment or in my LinkedIn inbox, which is currently a mess. But I figured this was the best time for me to try and do a Q&A. I'm going to be trying to answer not all, but at least some of the questions that I feel like are pretty important. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be giving you tips on how to package your LLM applications currently. That's what you're doing. So you really want to stick to the end of the episode. I mean, it's going to be like packed with both resources and tips on how to get yourself together. So please, let's jump right into the rest of the episode. Prospective and current LLM students, did you know that I currently have an ebook? Yes, a free ebook that is going to provide a lot of the resources that would help you as a guide when you're moving to the US or if you're already here, right? And so please check my description box. I'm going to be providing the link on how to download this, and just, it's free, guys. It's just free. There's nothing involved in it other than to say it's free. And another thing I want to remind you is that always know that you can always reach out to me. I can meet with everybody, but if you want a consultation, that is also going to be provided in the LinkedIn box, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm also going to provide an email for you to reach out to me, but consultation is at a fee because I can't meet with everybody for free. You just see my flows. Anyway, but I just wanted to highlight that if that is some sort of support, I've been meeting with a ton of folks recently, but if that is some support that you need as you're trying to get yourself together, either in the US job market or moving to the US here for your Masters of Law, I'm always available to provide support. So let me get to the first question. Do I need to become a lawyer in my country to apply for an LLM in the US? And that question is kind of packed, right? It depends on the school, but generally, I do not think that you need to be licensed in your country to apply for an LLM here in the US. There are some schools that would definitely give you preference if you're licensed and if you have some experience. Also, there are schools that will give you preference. Why? Because it's a master's program. They want to know that people who are coming here, have some sort of experience and can, it's not like you're coming to do an undergraduate degree again, right? So some schools will give preference, it seems, sometimes to folks who have been licensed, but generally you should look at the school's requirement to determine to figure out what the best decision or what the best answer to that question is. But generally, no, it's not a requirement. You just need your LLB degree, and that's it. So I hope I've answered that question. I get this one a lot. This one is, can I get into a good school with a 2-2? So it depends on what you call a good school, right? There are, generally, I know people who have gotten into great schools with a second class lower, right? So that's what a 2-2 means, in case people don't know what that means. With a second class lower, I know people who have gotten into good schools. It's really about how you package your application. I would say for a lot of people who have gotten that, the 2-2, something that really works and stands out for them is that they have very good work experience from their countries, right? So that is something that they use in balancing out their application, so that it does not look like, oh, this person is a 2-2 and still does not know what they've not been licensed, they have no work experience, so why are we giving you the admission in the first place? So I would say, yeah, you can get into good schools, maybe not the Harvard. Maybe not the Harvards, because those are the creme de la creme, but you can get into, I believe, any other school, any other good school with a 2-2, as long as you put your application well and it's you have a good resume and you can balance it out with good work experience. Now there are folks who don't even have work experience and have a 2-2 and have gotten in. In the end, it's really about how you package your application, right? Just bear that in mind. It's really about how you package your application. That's something that you need to know. But yeah, with a 2-2 and with good work experience, yeah, I've even seen someone who has a 2-2, good work experience and got a scholarship, right? So it's possible. You can even get a scholarship with a tutu. They are looking at the entirety of your application, right? But as I said, once again, it depends on the school. So always look out for the school requirements, the eligibility requirements. That is something that will determine whether you need to go ahead with this school or not. Okay, so let's go to the next question. The next question is, will a Master's of Law give you the 3-year OPT? In other words, is it a STEM course? This one is a quick one. Generally, Master of Law courses are not STEM courses, right? So whether it's a master in IP or technology or whatever it is, generally, again, I say, I cannot say anything in specificity because, schools may have different criteria, but generally, Master of Law courses are not, I repeat, they are not STEM courses, right? So they don't give you the 3-year OPT period. For most of the Master of Law students, what you get is 1 year after your LLM program, and that's it. That's the only OPT period you get. I'm sure you know what OPT is at this point. If you don't know, OPT means optional or optical practical training, right? I'm going to provide the text so that you know what I'm talking about in case I'm wrong in the pronunciation. But just bear in mind, for a lot of Master of Law students, you just have 1 year to work in the US after your degree. You're not categorized as STEM that get 3 years. So just bear that in mind as you're putting your application together. Okay, let's jump to the next question. Now, I have this one that is pretty interesting. While applying for an LLM, is it advisable to disclose that you already have an LLM from another country? So this one, I would say, it all once again comes down to how you're putting your application together, right? Some people will tell you, no, there's no need to disclose it, right? Like, for me, I feel like, why are you disclosing that information? What's the point? Does it add any value to your documentation? Does it add any value to your statements, right? Remember, you have your statement of work, your resume, your statement of purpose. Sorry, I'm thinking of legal agreements, but you have your statement of purpose, your resume, and all that, your recommendation letters. You need to ask yourself how that master's ties into it. Now, there are people who have double masters here in the US. It's not new, right? The question then becomes, if you've gotten a Master of Law already, why are you trying to get this master's? Like, what does it give you? If you want to disclose, why? So let me give you an example. Let's say that the first master's I got was a master's in tax, and I want to change careers. I want to go into IP. With that, A, you might not need to disclose that because that is not really relevant to the application. But B, even if you choose to disclose, right, it makes sense. You can say, oh, you've seen how, tech is such a big thing right now in the world, and you want to change careers. You believe a master's in IP is going to help you change careers. So that makes sense, right? But if you've had a master's in IP before and you want to get another master's in IP again in the US, it's a bit harder to justify, right? So I would say, really think critically about whether disclosing that information helps you or not, right? And if you've gotten a master's already, as I said, the question then becomes, and if you've gotten a master's in IP or a master's in something already, the question then becomes, why then are you getting the second master's? If you can't answer or justify that, there's a problem, right? So I would say, really think critically about that. But there's nothing that stops you, nothing that stops you from disclosing that information. You just have to create a good justification for it along the line. And I have to be honest, a lot of US schools are pretty, I want to say, they give admissions unless there's something wrong. This has been unless things have changed, right? They generally would give you admission. The problem is, they'll give you scholarship, but they will generally give you admission unless there's something wrong. Okay, so let's jump into the next question. The next question I have is, do I need work experience to apply for an LLM? And should I get some experience before getting my LLM in the US? I have to be honest, it's not a requirement, unless for some schools, as I said, that might say, oh, this is definitely a requirement for us. We want to make sure that you have some work experience. But I have to be honest that it helps to have work experience. It helps in the job market. It helps in your application, because remember, this is a master's. It's not an undergraduate degree, right? So a lot of times these people want to see that you have something to bring. You're not just coming to learn and sit in, like, you have experience that you're going to bring to the table. So a lot of times I would advise that you get some work experience. It helps you in the job market, right? And so just rather than rush after your LLB or your Bachelor of Laws straight to Master of Laws in the US, I always advise it depends on what your plan is. If your plan is to practice internationally or practice in the US, it's always good to have some work experience that shows that you're not completely new to working, right? You're not completely new to this law thing, right? It helps, but is it a requirement? That would depend on the school. But from a personal perspective of mine, and just based on my relationship with people, it always helps to have that work experience. The next one is, which LLMs are hot in demand? I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I've talked about this in one of my episodes. Please check them out. The link is probably in the description box or is somewhere up there. But please check it out. I've talked about the hottest LLMs in my opinion, but please do your research also. That's very important. It's not about just going for the hottest LLMs. I've talked about interest, the schools, all those things, play a role in whether an LLM is worth it or not. Right, so pay attention to those things. One thing I would say is really come up with a list. If there are LLM programs that you're considering, come up with a list, right, of those LLM programs that you're considering. Ask yourself if you're interested in that LLM program. Then go on LinkedIn and see if your plan is to practice in the US. Go on LinkedIn and see what the demand is for lawyers with those areas of expertise. That would help you really figure out if this is worth it or not. Because if you go for an LLM that is not a marketable LLM, it's a waste of money, one, and it could have been avoided. You spent a lot of money just for nothing, right? So I would say go on LinkedIn, see if there's demand for those areas that you're interested in. Look for good schools, and then that's a perfect combo. Another question I get is, how do I get scholarships? And I feel like this is a very big one, because I don't know if you guys know my story, but my story is a lot of these schools give partial scholarship. There are some that give full scholarships, like Penn State. I've heard Penn State does give full scholarships, so this is a plug for you to check Penn State out. But I would say a lot of these schools in the US give partial scholarships. And what happens is that a lot of these schools will tell you, while you are applying, there's no separate application process for a scholarship. So as you're applying for the LLM, you're being considered for a scholarship from there. What does that tell you? Package your application for an LLM very well, right? It shouldn't be a haphazard application. Please check out my episode with Destiny. Destiny applied, got into Harvard, Oxford. I mean, if you can follow his formula, I don't think there's any school that you won't get into. That's the honest truth. That's my opinion, right? So as I was saying, as you are applying for the LLM program itself, a lot of these schools will automatically consider you for a scholarship. What does that mean? You need to bring your A game, right? Now, about how to get scholarships, a lot of schools already would either have, they'll consider you for a partial scholarship, or their external scholarships as well. So you will do yourself a favor not just to rely on these internal scholarships, which are usually the ones that you're automatically considered for, but apply for a lot of external scholarships as well, and see, spread your eggs and see how you can get as many scholarships as possible. That would help you, because as I said, a lot of times this school will give you partial scholarship, and depending on the type of school and whether they give a substantial amount as partial scholarship or not, it might not make a lot of difference. So I'll give you my story. I went to US. I didn't go to USC, but I applied to USC. The tuition is $60,000, and then I think the partial scholarship I got was $6,000. So you see, the tuition 60, and then partial scholarship 6. That doesn't do much for me, right? And so you need to ask yourself the question of, how can I get external scholarships? That might be what you need to find, like external scholarships that might not be affiliated with schools. There are other schools also, just to mention, there are other schools that help with that give you a lot more, right? So it really depends. I'm going to be highlighting some of those schools in another episode, but there are a lot of other schools that give you some good scholarships as well. But you need to pay attention to all these things in making your decision. Also, I think you should check out my episode where I talk about how to fund your LLM. That is going to be very helpful to you. It's one of my highest views video. Lord, it's one of my highest viewed videos on the channel, right? So please check that out. I talked about how to fund it, be it scholarship, loans, and all that, and trying to get yourself together for that. I got this question recently. The question is, which LLM will help get an NIW or EB2? And how can my LLM help me apply for any of this? And I like the way people are thinking. I'm so grateful, right, that all the way in your countries you're already thinking about this, about my chances and options of immigration in the US. That is something that you're thinking about. But I want to be clear. So even if you go for one of the hottest LLMs, you don't get an NIW just because you have an LLM. So I want to make this very clear. The NIW is really, it's called the National Interest Waiver, right? EB2 NIW, whatever it's called. First of all, just bear in mind, I'm not an immigration attorney. I'm only sharing this based on my experience. And what you're trying to say is, you are somebody whose proposed endeavor is of national interest. So what does that mean? It really means that it's really not about the masters itself. It's what have you done with the masters, or are you going to do with the masters in the US that makes you of national interest, that makes it worth it for us to give you a green card based on your application. That's what it's really about. So even if I get an LLM in IP, technology, whatever, it's part of the requirements to have like an advanced degree, but it's not enough, right? There needs to be a story. And I'm going to do hopefully an episode that is really dedicated to NIW and attorneys, like what that looks like for attorneys. So just you need to pay attention to that it's not just about the LLM. It's about the whole story. What is the proposed endeavor? Is this of national interest to the United States, right? So let me give you an example. If you know my story, please check out my green card story. I'm sure the link will be somewhere. But check out my green card story. And if you remember my story, I shared how I didn't have it all together, right? I had my master's in IP, but it wasn't really the IP part. Well, the IP part of the work contributed, but that was not the only thing that helped me get my green card. I was supporting small businesses, and some of the work I was doing was not necessarily with IP, right? And so it really, what the US does is they look at it holistically. Yes, you have a master's, but why are you of national interest? So just bear that in mind. It's good to think of highly competitive LLMs, which and once again I'll refer you to my episodes where I talk about those hottest LLMs. It's good to go for those highly lucrative, where there's a real need in the US. Do your research and find that out. But in addition to that, there has to be a story, right? And more on that coming soon on one of my episodes. Now, I hope this has been helpful to you. I know that I've talked about, I feel like I've answered a lot of questions, maybe not all, but I hope it has been helpful to you. It's very important that you're diligent in putting your application together. Don't be lackadaisical about getting those letters of recommendation. Make sure you're reaching out to people who can speak to, because remember, for some of you who are interested in scholarships, your application is also a consideration for scholarship. So please check out my interview with Approva is one of such people who got a full ride, I believe, and it's just by it was just one application she made, right? It wasn't multiple applications. It was just one application she made and was automatically given a full ride scholarship. And something she talked about was her work experience, her statement of purpose. She wrote it genuinely and all stuff like that. Also check out my episode with Destiny, I know I've talked about that before, but please check that out because that's going to help you in putting your application together. But I wish you all the very best. I'm looking forward to welcoming you next year or whenever you come to the United States. Have a wonderful rest of your day. So, something I want to start doing on the channel is saying a prayer for folks. I know being an LLM it can be a lot. I'm a Christian. I'm someone who believes in God. I believe in Jesus. And so I just want to say a prayer for you. I pray that God helps you. I pray that God gives you the grace and the strength even as you put your application together, and that God sees you through. God gives you the wisdom, the diligence, all that you need to put your application together. And in the end, all your dreams will come through by His grace. In Jesus' name I've prayed. Amen.